Hi, this is Mary Kay's Positivity Podcast. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher and life coach. I'm also author of several self-help books. Today I have Royce Morales. She is a transformational facilitator, creator of the Perfect Life Awakening program, an author, columnist, keynote speaker, podcast guest, media show host, an expert in mirroring, which we're going to talk a lot about, and awakening people to help them discover a true life purpose and trusting intuition to transform life. So she's helped thousands of entrepreneurs, creatives, artists, business owners, lawyers, executives, couples, and teachers transform their lives, discovering their soul purpose and embody their authenticity. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So tell us about your journey and really how you got involved in this work.
I've always been interested in spirituality and trying to find out what the heck life is about. I started asking my mother questions at the age of 4. And she thought,
yeah,
really?
I believe it.
She would give me these ridiculous answers, and I knew she was making it up because she had no idea. And I had this kind of a spiritual awakening, really, at the age of 4. She had asked me to wash the window in the front of our house, and I was standing there washing the window, innocently minding my own business, and all of a sudden I had this realization that I was going to die. And then it expanded and it turned into, gosh, my mom's going to die. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to die. And it freaked me out because I had never had that concept before. And I went running into the kitchen and with tears streaming down my eyes. And I said, Mom, what happens when you die? And she looked at me like, oh my God, this 4-year-old is crazy. And she said, oh, it's just what happens. That's called life. And the most important thing to do is just to keep people in your memory. And one of these really cliched answers, and I looked at her and thought, this isn't right. And it really started my journey. And I got very serious about it as a teenager. And then after college, I had just studied everything I could study and read books. And I took personal development training. And then I accidentally, and of course there's no accidents, I landed in a place in Beverly Hills that taught people how to be channelers. At that point, because I was so frustrated with my questions that couldn't get answered, I had become a major skeptic. And I landed in this place, and that's a whole other story, but landed there, and all of a sudden I started having these experiences of spirit reaching me. And I got all this information for people, and I became their star channeler and had a few out-of-body experiences and all kinds of stuff. At one point, the teacher asked me to cover for her. She was going on vacation. And I said, sure, I'll take over the class for a night. So I sat there and basically did nothing, except I just opened up the space for people to share. And these people had known each other for years, but nobody had ever allowed them to really talk to each other. And so after the class, one of the students came up to me and said, Royce, you seem to know a lot of things. Would you consider teaching me? And I literally thought she was crazy. I really did. And my inner voice was saying, oh my God, I don't know anything. I'm just a seeker like you. What are you talking about? And out of my mouth came, sure, I'd love to bring your friends. And so she did.
Wow.
And 10 people show up in my living room, and I stuttered and stammered and got out information that I had learned over my lifetime, and slowly it evolved to receiving information, like little downloads here and there of information that was certainly new to me, and it was new to everybody else, and people kept sending their friends, and eventually I opened my own center, and the rest is history, as they say. It was all basically intuitive information that really helped people change their lives. It was just amazing. I'm still amazed at it.
Well, so how would you help people change their life? What kind of downloads could they receive that would jumpstart it?
Basically, what I received was information that helped people to get in touch with the origins, not just the superficial level, but the origins of what was causing them to be triggered in life, whether it's in this life or in past lives or between lives, wherever it is. There are very specific incidents that cause us to be prone to being triggered. And from that, we walk through life and we're angry and we're upset and we're judgmental and we keep recreating the same patterns over and over. We keep making choices that are negative because we just literally don't feel deserving of having a life that works. So I help people get in touch with that and literally neutralize it so it doesn't have an impact. And from that, patterns start to change, their reactiveness goes away, the judgmentalness stops, all of that starts disappearing, and it's no longer affecting their life, and everything changes, everything shifts.
So when you go through a past life experience, if you have something traumatic happen, that just erases the experience in your current life?
It does. And it's not that it erases, you still have the memory of it, but it flattens the charge, so to speak, that it has on you. So in other words, you re-experience it and look at it in terms of what did I decide from that, and what did I decide about myself, and what did I decide about life, and all of those things get brought to the surface, and they literally go poof, and they no longer have that impact. You could still describe that experience, but it's just like telling a story rather than, oh, this was so awful. So that's the effect that it has. Yeah.
It's almost like you're non-reactive.
Yes.
And
exactly.
so that's how you call yourself the awakener, right?
Yes, because things are definitely awakened from the past, and you discover who you really are. You discover your life purpose. You discover your power. All of that stuff gets awakened, and it's pretty miraculous. It really is. It still blows my mind when that happens for people.
I've learned a lot about past lives, like even with my children, and it totally makes sense what they're dealing with in today. And it really is fascinating. It actually does help you overcome triggers and that type of thing. You talk a lot about mirroring. Can you tell our audience what that is and how can it help people heal their past?
Sure. I would say the core of what I teach, and just to warn your listeners, everybody hates it. Everybody hates that concept because what it does is it allows you to be fully responsible for your life. And nobody wants that. People want to be victims. It's much easier to just blame everybody. So basically mirroring, the way that I describe it is if you can imagine a seesaw and you have one side of the seesaw being pushed down, what's going to happen to the other side? It's going to fly up. So mirroring is the side of the seesaw that flies up. So if I'm pushing something down, let's say I'm pushing down my anger because I've judged my anger as bad, or maybe I did something terrible with my anger in some past life. So I'm going to push that down. So what's going to happen is somewhere in my life, that anger is going to show up as the other side of that seesaw. And it's going to be in my face, and I'm not going to like it, but it's showing me something that I've suppressed and denied and judged about myself. And on an energetic level, on a higher consciousness level, we want to get in touch with those things that we've suppressed. So we subconsciously choose people and situations to do that for us. I'll tell a story about how this worked in my life, but I might subconsciously choose a man that's going to be angry all the time so that I can look at my suppressed anger. And that actually did happen in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I met this wonderful man, sweet, kind, loving, caring, just incredibly higher consciousness. And we ended up getting married. And within about a month of this wonderful marriage of bliss, all of a sudden, out of the blue, started getting pissed off, like to the point of punching through walls, that kind of anger. And I would look at him, who is this guy? I didn't marry this guy.
Right. You pretended you were calm and nice.
Yeah. And so I know, actually, in terms of mirrors, what he was doing was showing me how suppressed my anger was. And it took me quite a while to see that because I just kept judging him and thinking, oh my God, I made such a mistake. And I thought, yeah, maybe he was hiding all that anger. But what I realized and did my own work, my own self, I realized that I had been suppressing my anger, not only from this life, but from lots of past lives. And discovering origins of that and started to get in touch with and neutralize all of that old anger. And guess what?
What?
He stopped punching out walls. He didn't have to change at all. He just stopped being the other side of my seesaw. And it was quite amazing.
That's really interesting. So what was your past life that made you so angry? Can you share that?
Lots of them. Yeah. Basically, I was angry at myself, which is what I talk about a lot in terms of mirroring. Who we're really angry at is ourselves because of things that we've done that we haven't forgiven ourselves for. We've pushed them down. I call them fear-based actions that we've done. And there were lots of them in my lifetimes. The pattern of that for me has been from as far back as I've seen, which is very far back in many lives. I am here to awaken people, to be a spiritual teacher. And there were several lifetimes that I ignored that purpose, shall we say, or didn't do it ethically or bought into fear. I took a few lifetimes off where I said, oh, I don't need to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was angry at myself. Bottom line, that's really the core issue for me. And that's really the core issue for most people because they've forgotten what their purpose is or they've bought into fear and they're not taking the risk, so to speak, of expressing their purpose and their empowerment. So everything gets messed up. And of course, what's really messed up is I don't deserve anything in life because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do here.
Right.
So that's really big for people.
So how do people know what their life purpose is? Like, when is it obvious you're on the right path?
When that person came up to me and said, would you consider teaching me? That was the furthest thing from my mind. I was the kind of student all through school that never said a word in class. I was so terribly shy. And I actually remember going to dinner with a guy I was dating in college, and he said to me, so Royce, what do you plan to do when you grow up? And I said, I don't know. I'm an art major, but I can tell you one thing, I'll never be a teacher.
So you were still in denial.
I was totally in denial. And I was in denial for probably the first year of having people arrive in my living room wanting me to teach them. I would sit there and I would think, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? I don't know what I'm doing. And I would tape the classes and I would listen to them after they left and I would cry and I would say, oh, this is so horrible. And it took me quite a while to say, okay, this is my purpose. And I tried to walk away many times, but it wouldn't work. So I think there's a part of us that really does know what our purpose is, but we're in denial. And sometimes, like I said, it could be the last thing in the world that you ever think is your purpose, ever.
No, it's interesting you say that because I was scared of public speaking and I even forced myself to take a public speaking course and it just wasn't natural for me. And then when I was working, somebody asked me to speak to the interns and I thought, how bad could it be? They're in college. So I spoke to them and then afterwards, the president of the company came running into my office and who was speaking to the interns? Who was speaking to the interns? And I was scared to even admit it was me. I was like, I'm going to get in trouble. So I said, I'm sorry, it was me. And he goes, my daughter was in that class and she said it was the best speaker she'd ever heard. And so then that gave me the confidence that I realized, because now in a lot of my work, I'm like a megaphone, kind of waking up the people. And with the podcasts and my books talk a lot about these things. And so it's just interesting that I ended up becoming a speaker for people.
Yeah.
After being afraid, like you.
Yeah, exactly. I think our fears are trying to tell us something. Don't run away, but run toward them.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And I also think when you're on the right path, isn't it a little bit easier?
Sometimes it was for me. For quite a while, students kept appearing and eventually it became second nature to give the information out. And now I can do it backwards and forwards. And I trust the intuition that is still downloading in my life. I'm still getting information all the time. But it did take a while. It really did, because like I said, there was part of me that really didn't believe that I didn't deserve to do this. Who am I to be doing this?
Right. That's self-sabotage that we
Oh,
all
yeah.
do.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
why do people live with self-sabotage and how does mirroring help?
Well, like I said, mirroring is showing us the deepest suppressed, denied aspect of ourself that we have learned to completely ignore. So by getting in touch with that, you can discover the sources of that, and the self-sabotage starts to melt away.
Hmm.
That's what happens all the time for my students. They realize, oh, I've been sabotaging myself because I don't believe I deserve this job or this promotion or this boyfriend or whatever it is.
Hmm.
If once they see that, they don't have to live from that place and they can let it go and shift their lives. I just talk about mirrors as being the most incredible tool to help wake us up so that we can deserve our power. We can deserve what's showing up in life. And we can attract more of that.
Hmm. Is it similar to how they say when something bothers you about a person, look at yourself, that it might be a trait you have?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or a funny expression I heard one time, you spot it, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, what would be an example of a mirror?
An example of a mirror, gosh, there's hundreds. So if I have a belief that says women are irresponsible, and this is part of mirroring that I think is really fascinating. So I have this belief that says women are irresponsible. So I would attract somebody in my life to mirror that to me. And that person might be someone that has an equally strong belief that says, I'm irresponsible, or that men are irresponsible. So we would be drawn together magnetically, just literally on a spiritual magnetic level. We would be there with each other to push each other's buttons and to trigger each other so that we can get in touch with that. So the person that's irresponsible would push my buttons and I would push her buttons because she believes that she's responsible. And we would just do this dance together until one of us realizes, oh, you're my mirror. Okay, great.
Yeah. So, if you both feel like victims under these false
Yeah,
notions, right?
yeah, yes.
Tell us the importance of past lives in the healing process. Do you think
I
everyone needs to learn about their past lives to be
well,
able to move forward?
I'm prejudiced about that because
Mm.
that's my work.
Right,
But
right.
I find that people can only go so far. And a lot of people are not ready to look at past lives. I don't encourage it until somebody really is ready. And sometimes you need to look at this life first. I do find that to really get to the bottom, to the core, to the origins of
Hmm.
what's going on and what's triggering you, you've got to go deep. And some people are just not ready to do that much deep work. I have a lot of students, they drop out after 10 weeks because they got what they needed and they're done. But I have some students that have been with me for years and they just keep going deeper and deeper. And
Hmm.
there's value in every single shovel full, as I say.
Hmm. So, when you meet someone, do you see their past lives or do you just have a feeling about someone or do you really have to tap in to get that?
I don't do that. I could. Sometimes that comes up for me when I'm meditating or working with them,
Hmm.
but I think it's much more important that they get in touch with it. It's like when you go to a psychic and a psychic says, oh, yeah, you were a king of England in the 18th century, and they give you this whole story. It's interesting. It's a nice story. It might trigger something, but it's very different for you to be in a meditative process, which I use, and get in touch with that lifetime because then it becomes real. It becomes a memory
Hmm.
versus a story.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I have had instances where I just felt as though my higher consciousness says, you need to tell this person a bit of their past life to help them kind of.
You know what's interesting about that is my daughter did this meditation with someone who trained with Dolores Cannon. She literally got the name of the person she was in a past life. It was this businessman that was very successful and he was very politically involved. And when you read about his life, literally every trait is my daughter. It was really
Wow.
fascinating. He was a big voice for the people and he tried to do what was right. And But he didn't have a good marriage. That was the interesting part. But to get a name and to be able to research the guy, it was wild.
Yeah, that's unusual. Usually it's more generic.
That's
Yeah.
what he said.
Yeah.
It's really unusual to get a name. So she went and looked it up and it matched the description. So
Wow.
it was really interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects you're working on now? Because I know you host podcasts on Times Media.
Sometimes, yes. I
Yes.
have two podcasts.
Hmm.
One of them is called the Perfect Life Awakening Program, based on the title of my teachings. And that podcast interviews various amazing people that are doing interesting and important work in the world.
Mhm.
And the other podcast is called It's All Mirrors. And that one is where I put out some of my teachings and I bring people on that are either students or people that are doing mirroring type work, and we get into depth about various topics. And working on that, I've written several books, and I'm working on one right now. I finally have a literary agent, so hopefully it's going to be picked up and it's
Oh,
going to
excellent.
all about mirrors. All
Yeah.
about mirrors. Yes.
I
about-
love this concept because it can also help with soulmates and meeting a spouse. Sometimes we are attracted to that same type of Playboy player or whatever, and then you end up marrying someone totally different than the type you dated your whole life.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I find that the biggest mirrors are the ones that you are in a relationship with, and
Mhm.
your parents and your children. Those are the big ones because those are the ones that you've chosen to spend a long quality time with.
Mhm.
So, of course, they're going to be the most accurate and the biggest button pushers to
Yeah.
wake you up for suppressing and denying.
What would you say to someone who didn't have boundaries with a lot of people? If you've been living your lifetime not making boundaries, how do you really change that trait to start putting boundaries up?
I don't encourage to put boundaries up.
Oh.
I'm sure that there are some that are important, obviously,
Mhm.
but most of the time, if you start perceiving life as being one big mirror and you attract somebody that does something that you don't like, the more evolved thing to do is to see, why did I attract this person to abuse me? Why do I need to go through that? What is that about? Now, of course, I don't encourage you to stick in a relationship that's abusive,
Right.
but to use it as part of your evolution, your growth, and to see what they're mirroring is tremendous. And then they can go away. You don't need that mirror anymore, which is probably the biggest benefit of understanding mirrors. Once I stop pushing stuff down on my side of the seesaw, it neutralizes and they can get off the seesaw and you don't need them anymore.
So if you are attracting an abusive authority figure or person, maybe you are abusing yourself in ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I find that in some past life, you abused somebody and you haven't forgiven yourself and resolved that. So you get somebody to wake you up to that and say, here we go. Here's what you did.
Oh, wow.
You can look at it. Yeah.
Interesting. What's some of the best advice you've received from someone that's trained you and helped you on your spiritual path?
Basically, I've trained myself.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, like I said, it was all downloaded as I would sit there teaching. Words would come out of my mouth and I'd think, oh, who said that? And I'd write it down or I'd listen to my recording after they left and take notes on myself because it was pretty amazing stuff that was coming through. But like I also said, I did read a lot and study a lot and do a lot of things, but they were all just little pieces of a bigger puzzle for me, taking me to where I am with all of this.
Who do you think was speaking? Was it just your subconscious, or do you think it was really someone speaking through you?
I think it's probably both. My higher consciousness, when I'm teaching, it really takes over. And sometimes somebody will ask me a question and I'll have no idea about the answer. And I'll open my mouth and the answer would come. So it's that sort of thing. It's just being tuned into my higher consciousness as well as all that's going on out there. It's all there. We trust it.
Wow. So it's just like great wisdom constantly flowing.
I would.
Yeah. I find that people have a lot of negative or recurring thoughts that keep them in this anxious state. And that's actually why I started this podcast, because I felt like the anxiety and depression was reaching these epidemic levels. How can we help people remove anxiety from our life?
I'll sign up for my course. Let's plug. But yeah, that's what happens because we're all living from constant fear and constant anxiety. And my feeling and what I'm receiving intuitively is that there's some kind of a huge transformation happening on a planetary level. And we have to go through this final hurrah of lies and terrible things happening and people doing ridiculous things in the world so that we can wake up and get to the point where we're really striving, which is to reach the point of love and acceptance and compassion and inclusion and tolerance, all of that stuff. But we can't get there, just like we can't get there personally by denying what's going on subconsciously. We can't get there on a planetary level by shoving things underground and not allowing people to teach history and all of that stuff that's going on. We've got to, and I think the anxiety and the fear that people are living in right now is really exacerbated from all of that. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I absolutely know that.
I believe that too. I feel like there's been a spiritual awakening to get back to integrity when integrity really mattered. And I think it's all so important.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah. As a child, you were aware of this gift because you just had these deeper questions that a 4-year-old typically doesn't have. But then what happened when you were a teenager? Did you feel like more mature and evolved than your peers? Was it hard to connect with your peers because you had this greater sense of awareness?
Yes. I felt like an absolute crazy person all the time.
Aww.
And I learned to just suppress it and just be normal and do normal teenage thing and connect with people on a very superficial level. And in fact, after high school and during college, I met the person that I ended up marrying, and I made a conscious choice to completely be normal. I let all of that go and suppressed it and denied it and just became this typical little housewife and had a child and bought a washing machine and did all the normal things. And then when my son was about 2 years old, I woke back up to it. And I said, oh my gosh, what have I been doing these last 10 years? And you said I had this gift when I was 4. I didn't see it as a gift. I just thought, well, my mom doesn't have answers. Nobody knows anything. There's something wrong with me. So I didn't perceive it as a gift until quite a few years later.
Yeah, because it usually runs in families. So your mom obviously didn't have it, but any other family members?
Absolutely not. My mother was a certified genius, and all she ever did was talk from a logical place. She didn't believe in religion. She didn't believe in spirits. She didn't believe in reincarnation. Every single thing that I do, she thought was crazy.
You're like polar opposites.
Polar opposites, yes. And everybody else in my family, my sister's an accountant. I mean, there couldn't be two more opposing situations in a family. So again, I just learned to suppress it.
I feel like I've woken up my parents to this metaphysical world because they were closed to it, and all of my children have this ability, and I'm intuitive, so it just kind of opens up your world and introduces you to so many fascinating people that I've been trying to help them be open to it now. So that was good. It took a while.
Well, my mother, interestingly enough, there's a great story about that. Like I said, she thought all of the spiritual stuff was hogwash. And she was on her deathbed. Literally, she was going to die in 2 or 3 days. And I was there taking care of her. And she called me into her room and she said, Rice, who's that person in the corner? She's gold. Who is that? And I looked around, there was nobody there. And I said, Mom, you must be seeing a spirit. And she looked at me like, oh, really, maybe this stuff does exist. But that was the only experience she ever had right on her deathbed. She got it.
It's interesting when my grandmother was dying and I was there in the room, she was like, "Oh, Vinny says there's a party for me." And she was naming all these people that had already passed away, and they were all
Wow.
there telling her to come to this party. And it was a real big party family. So
Wow.
I was like, "Vinny's not here." It was just funny that they were all in the
Wow.
room and I couldn't see him either. But I think
Yeah.
they are awakening them to the next journey, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, how do you deal with triggers in the moment? What can people do when there is a trigger and somebody in their life pops up and says something that makes them want to overreact?
The best thing that I find, and it's really having to train yourself to do this, but eventually it gets easier. But the best thing to do is to immediately recognize they must be mirroring something to me.
Mm-hmm.
I just tell people, just say that in your head. They must be mirroring something. And honestly, it's hard to see mirrors because there's a part of us that does not like that. We don't like to see that person that being a jerk is really me. And why do I believe I'm a jerk? And what do I do that's jerky?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see that. We don't want to admit that. But the first step, because if you can even just admit that there must be a mirror here, and then maybe later on when you're not as triggered, you take a look at it and meditate on it and see what they're really showing you. But right in that moment, you can diffuse stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, if somebody is super competitive and everything that comes out of their mouth is upsetting, if she no longer bothers you, then you are no longer mirroring those traits. Is that it?
Yeah, you would just say, oh, that person is competitive. There wouldn't be any charge on it. It would just be an observation.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. That's really interesting. Yeah. So it's almost like non-reactive to life.
Yes.
And that's freedom and that's
It is.
confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's what you're left with is, wow, that person is so competitive and I love them so much and I feel compassion for that.
Mhm.
Not from a fake, what I call Joe spiritual place,
Right.
but from a real place of, oh my gosh, wow, I love them. So yeah, that's what happens too when you really get to the bottom of it. Because you're probably locating a time where you did something competitively and you've been judging yourself about it and suppressing it, and then when you can see their competitiveness clearly as, oh, they're just coming from fear like I was. Okay, gosh, I love them.
Mhm.
So that's what happened. Yeah. For example, I'll give you a story of one of my students. She was dating a man who she discovered was a major heroin addict. She had no idea when she started to date him. He was really big into drugs. And she found herself judging him and hating him and wanting him to leave, but she also loved him, and there was that conflict going on.
Mhm.
And so when we worked on it together, I said, he must be a mirror of something. And she went quickly into denial. He couldn't be a mirror. I don't use heroin. I'm not addicted to drugs.
Mhm.
I said, okay, well, let's explore it and see what he's mirroring. So after doing some deep work, she realized that he was reflecting to her the fact that she had a very addictive personality. She was addicted to chocolate chip cookies and exercise and making people wrong and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was symbolic of that to her. It was just as charged as if she were a heroin user.
Mhm.
So there's that thing that happens with mirrors too. What do they symbolize?
That is fascinating because someone
Yeah.
could be an alcoholic and you are
Yeah.
addicted to whatever else. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. I have learned so much, and this has been a fascinating conversation. How can people work with you? You talked about the Perfect Life Awakening.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners more information so they can read your book that's going to come out and get in touch to do your workshops?
Sure. The website is perfectlifeawakening.com. My other way to reach me is roycemorales.com. That's Joyce with an R, morales.com. I'm always starting new series. I do 10-week remote series on Zoom. And the groups are small, so you get lots of individual attention, and they're wonderful, they're enlightening, they will change your life. And hopefully my book will be published soon, and you can find it everywhere, hopefully.
Yes, we'll pray
And
for you.
thank you. And I do have those 2 podcasts on Om Times Media, Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., and I do post the links to them after the show. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me at roycemorales.com.
And you're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as Royce Morales.
Yes, I'm everywhere.
Good. All right. We will hopefully have you on the show again soon. I really appreciated your time, and thanks so much.
Thank you. And you keep up the good work over there.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Please find a comfortable position anywhere you want. Allow your back to rest in a chair, on a wall, on the bed. And just take a deep breath in, inhaling all that beautiful energy and exhaling, just letting go of fears and narratives that no longer serve you. Inhale, feeling that integrity and authenticity and joyfulness of living your new life. And then exhale, letting go of victim mentalities, negative patterns, reactive emotions. Just let them leave your body. You can visualize this and it works. Allow your brow to soften. Unclench your teeth. Relax your jaw. Just notice a shift in the body, feeling more and more relaxed, going deeper and deeper. Imagine your purposeful life. Ultimately, who are you really? You are an authentic human with amazing ideas and lots to contribute to the world. So start visualizing in this deeply relaxed state so that you can discover your true purpose. Allowing fear to dissipate. Self-doubt is leaving your body now. You no longer feel pain, depression, anger. Allow it to leave your body so that when you meet people, you are completely unaffected by what they say and do. You are in a joyful, happy state of being, purposeful state of being. Allow your shoulders to relax. The upper and lower back softens, releases all the tension. Let your arms feel loose and heavy. Maybe shake them out. Your palms, open them wide. Squeeze into a tight fist and open them again. Now let your hips feel heavy, relaxed, deeply empowered. And your legs relax. Take a deep breath in, inhaling the beautiful energy, awakening the subconscious. Now exhale any negativity. Let it go. Inhale positivity and release negativity. Imagine this beautiful sunrise. What are the colors in the sky? Yellow, purple, pink, orange. And imagine as the sun rises, it's beaming its sunbeams on your face. And let your body soak in that vitamin D, all that sunshine. And as you soak in that sunshine, feel this joyfulness, this ecstatic joy lifting your spirits, creating a new you that is positive and unreactive. You are extraordinary. You are deserving of this amazing life. Trust yourself, your intuition, to do what's right, to follow your path. Thank you for joining us today. Namaste.